In this tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through the writing and publishing process of a research context. As the first step, you're going to have to identify the standard structure of a research paper. And the main purpose of a research structure is to organize and present the study to the readers so they can clearly understand the purpose, method, results, and meaning of the research. As we discussed in a previous video, the most academic research follow a widely accepted format called IMRAD. So it stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and the Discussion. The title page basically includes the research title, author name, institution, and the date. And in the abstract, a short summary may be between 150 to 250 words, including purpose, method, results, and conclusion. And the introduction section, it basically includes background information, problem statement, research gap and objectives, and research questions and hypotheses. And in the literature review, it focuses on the research design, participants, sample, data collection methods, instruments, procedure, data analysis techniques. And the results of the findings, the reader can come across the data analysis outcomes, tables, statistics, and the themes. And in the discussion, the interpretation of results, connection to research questions, comparison with previous studies, and implications. And after that, conclusion, and it includes the summary of key findings and the overall message, and the limitations, the weaknesses of study, and recommendations, or in other words, future research. There can be suggestions for practice or further studies, and the reference section, all the sources cited using a standardized citation style. And finally, the appendices section, where the questionnaires, interview guides, extra tables, and raw data will be presented. And we have prepared a section-by-section writing tips for when you're working on a title. Just keep it clear and specific and concise. Include key variables on topic or avoid unnecessary words. For an example, impact of social media use on academic performance of university students. When you're writing the abstract, just write last because it helps you summarize purpose, methods, results, and conclusion briefly. You can usually use about 150 to 250 words. In this part, you should focus on the research problem, method, and key findings along with the implications. And when you're working on the introduction part, start broad and narrow the focus. Explain the background and research gap, problem statement, and the objectives. Simply put, you have to focus on the context, importance, research questions, and hypotheses. You can start off by, despite increased use of AI services, customer perception remains unclear, and you can continue. And for the literature review part, compare and evaluate previous studies and show research gap using citations properly. In here, you can mention what others found and limitations and how your study differs from them. For an example, you can start the writing. Previous studies focused on technical performance rather than the user perception, and then you can continue. For the methodology, you should clearly explain how the study was conducted and be detailed enough to replicate. In this part, you should focus on the research design, sample and instruments, data collection, and analysis methods. And the results part, you should present findings objectively and use tables and charts and statistics and no interpretations here. In other words, your focus must be rest on the data summaries and statistical results. And in the discussion section, you should interpret results and compare with literature and explain meaning and implications. So you have to focus on why results occurred and their significance along with the comparison theory. For conclusion section, you have to summarize main findings and contributions, but do not introduce new information. So technically, your focus has to be on the key outcomes and implications and the recommendations. And for the reference section, follow the required citation style, where they could be APA, IEEE, or Harvard. And make sure to include the author names here, and the correct formattings depend on the citation style that you have used. And next up, we have an academic writing guide. This includes the things you should do and the things you should not do. And when it comes to the formal tone, you should not use slangs or casual language like kids. Instead of kids, you can use children. And also you have to use clear and more precise language. For an example, instead of you use things in your research, you can replace them with the word variables, and that introduces a sense of formality into your study. And when objective writing, you should avoid emotional language such as amazing results. You can replace it with significant results. And when it comes to third-person perspective, you should not use phrases like I think. Instead of that, you can use the study shows. And also you have to be concise when it comes to your sentences. Avoid unnecessary words like due to the fact that, and replace them with a word like because. And always use evidence-based claims and support your statements with citations. And demonstrate the consistency. For example, you can use a consistent terminology and tense. And also you should avoid absolute claims such as using words like proves, always, never. You can replace them with may, suggest, and indicates. And also ensure a logical flow. Use linking words for coherence, using words such as therefore, however, and furthermore. And next up, we have common grammar mistakes and how to avoid them. And the mistake number 1 indicates run-on sentences. So the incorrect example would be the study was conducted, it shows results. And the correct version is the study was conducted and it shows results. The second mistake is the subject-verb disagreement. For example, you might write the results shows and the results are plural, and you cannot just keep the verb that way, and the correct version is the results show. The next mistake is using informal languages. For an example, you might use a lot of people in your writing, and the correct example is the many participants. And the fourth mistake is the repetition. You're using the same word repeatedly and unnecessarily. For an example, you might use very, very important again and over again. You can basically replace it with the word important. And the next common mistake is the wordiness, using too many unnecessary words. For an example, you could use conjunction in order to too many times. You can simply replace it with to. And next mistake is passive overuse. That is because the excessive usage of passive voice reduces the clarity. For example, just in case you have used too many passive voice in your research writing, like it was observed that, you can replace it with the researchers observed. And the next mistake is incorrect tense use. Inconsistent tenses like the study shows and examined. So you can replace it with the study showed and examined. And the next most common mistake is poor citation, missing references. For an example, you could include that the research proves, but actually the correct version has to be the research shows, along with the author and the year of publication. And the last common mistake is the ambiguous pronouns. For an example, you might use the shows improvement, but the actual or the correct version has to be this result shows improvement. Alright, chapter 12 is research paper templates. There are two main formats that inspires these templates, and the first one is APA format. So APA format is the American Psychological Association format. It's a standardized style of writing and formatting academic papers. As the first component of this format, it includes the title page. It includes the paper title, author name, institutional affiliation, course details, instructor, date, and running head. For example, impact of social media on student performance. Second component is the abstract. It's the brief summary of the research study, typically around 150 to 250 words, which includes the research purpose, methods, results, and the conclusions. It's basically written as a one paragraph. And the third component is the main body. So it's the core content of the research paper. That includes the introduction, literature review, methodology, results, discussion. And the next component is headings and subheadings. APA style has 5 heading levels with specific formattings. For example, for methods and results and discussion. And the next component is the in-text citations. So it includes the credited sources within the text, such as the author and date format like we used before. And the next component is the references list, in which includes all the sources cited in the paper. And the next component is the tables and figures, so it presents data visually. And the last component is the appendices, so it includes the extra supporting materials such as the questionnaire, raw data, detailed calculations. And this is the resources table we have prepared for APA style writing format. So feel free to visit all these links and be familiar with those templates. And this is the second format, IEEE format. As the main component, you can see the title, author or the authors, and the affiliation. And the abstract, keywords, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, and the acknowledgements, references, and finally figures and tables. And this is the resources table we have prepared for IEEE styles format. You can also go through the link. And our next topic is abstract writing. So abstract is a concise summary of a research paper that basically highlights the essential elements of the study. It typically includes 150 to 250 words. This can be seen at the beginning of a paper, following the title and the author's information. And these are the main components of an abstract. So first one is the purpose and the objective, like why the study was conducted. You can use this formula, this study investigates and your research problem to the purpose. As this example here, this study investigates the impact of social media usage on university students' academic performance. Next one is methods. So it's basically how the research was conducted. Using the given formula, the example is using a quantitative survey. Data were collected from 150 students and analyzed using correlation and regression techniques. And the results and findings is the main outcome of discoveries. Use that given formula. And here we have an example. The results indicate a significant negative correlation between time spent on social media and GPA. The fourth component is the conclusion or the implications, the meaning of the relevance of results. As the example, these findings suggest that limiting social media use may improve academic performance among university students. And our next topic is the visual elements. This is all about the tables, figures, charts, graphs, diagrams, and the images. And this table includes the standard guidelines for visual elements in research papers. And we have used APA guidelines and IEEE guidelines to construct this table. For tables, they are numbered sequentially in APA, such as Table 1, Table 2. In IEEE guidelines, the tables are numbered sequentially, but for numbering we use Roman numbers. But when it comes to the figures and graphs, in both styles, numbering is all the same, but we use word figure in APA guidelines, but in IEEE guidelines we use fig as a shortened form. And when it comes to the images, we use captions below the image and include the source if it is not your original work. It's the same thing even with the IEEE guidelines. When referencing to these elements in text, we basically use as shown in Table 1 or Figure 2 illustrates in APA styles. And when it comes to the IEEE guidelines, we use as shown in Table 1 or Fig 2 shows. When it comes to placements, and in APA style is really close to first mentioned in the text, so avoid breaking pages unnecessarily. And in IEEE guidelines, place near first reference and keep tables, figures on the same page if possible. When it comes to the clarity and the readability, in APA style we use readable fonts, consistent style, and high resolution. And when it comes to the IEEE, we use clear tables and readable fonts and distinguishable lines and colors. We have come to the chapter 13, which is publishing your research. The publication process is the final step in sharing your findings with the academic and professional community. This process ensures that your work is validated, recognized, and accessible to other researchers and practitioners as well as the policymakers. We have broken down the entire process into 7 steps. As the first step, selecting a journal or conference. It is to identify a journal or conference relevant to your field and consider the scope, audience, impact factor, and open access policies and submission requirements. The second script is preparing the manuscript. First of all, you have to follow the target journal's formatting guidelines, whether it could be APA, IEEE, Chicago, or Harvard, and include all the necessary sections like we mentioned before in the template: abstract, keywords, introduction, method, results, discussions, conclusions, references, tables, and figures, and ensure the clarity and conciseness and the proper citations. The next step is to submit the manuscript. So submit it through a journal's online portal or email. Include all cover letter highlighting the importance of your research. Some journals require suggested reviewers or declaration of conflicts of interest. And then the peer review process. It is the process where the manuscript is evaluated by experts in the field for validity, originality, and significance. There are 3 types of peer review: the single-blinded, double-blinded, and the open review. And the reviewers provide feedback for improvement or recommend acceptance or the rejection. And the 5th step is revisions and resubmissions, and it addresses reviews' comments carefully and makes necessary changes accordingly, and prepare a response letter detailing how feedback was incorporated into your research. The 6th step is acceptance and the publications. Once they accept your work, and the manuscript goes through copy editing, formatting, and proofreading, and the article is then published online or in print with DOI assignment for citation. The 7th step is post-publication activities, such as you promote your research through academic networks, social media, and conferences, and track citations and impact using platforms like Google Scholar. Here are some of the key tips for successful publications. First, you have to choose the right journal for your audience and research type, and then follow all the formattings and ethical guidelines. And the third one is respond to reviewers professionally and constructively. And the 4th tip is to ensure that your research adds value and novelty to the field. And our next topic is journal selection. It is about choosing the right journal. This is a critical step to ensure your research reaches the intended audience and has the maximum impact. There are a couple of criteria you have to live by. The first criterion is scope and focus, because you should choose a journal that should align with your research topic and the field. For an example, a paper on machine learning in healthcare fits journals like IEEE Transactions on medical imaging. And the audience, you should consider who reads the journal: academics, practitioners, and policymakers. For an example, clinical journals reach healthcare professionals, and the computer science journals reach researchers. And the impact factor of the reputation. It basically indicates that the journal's influence and the credibility in the field. For an example, high impact factor journals like Nature or IEEE Transactions are highly regarded. The next criterion is indexing and abstracting. It is to ensure that your journal is indexed in recognized databases, because indexed journals increase visibility and citations. The next criterion is open access versus subscription. Basically, open access increases readership, and subscription journals may have prestige. A better example here is the PLOS ONE as open access and IEEE Transactions as a subscription. The next criterion is acceptance rate of the review time. Low acceptance rate indicates selectivity, and shorter review time may speed up the process for publication. And the next criterion is ethical status, because the journal must follow all the ethical guidelines for peer review, plagiarism, and conflicts of interest. And next criterion is formatting and submission requirements. It is to ensure that you can comply with manuscript length, citation style, and the template. For an example, APA, IEEE, and journal-specific templates must be followed. The next one is publication fees. Some journals require fees for submission or open access publication. It is advisable to plan a budget if journal charges more than $1,000 for open access. And lastly, the turnaround time is the time from submission to publication that can affect relevance specifically in fast-moving fields. And some journals provide fast-track options, and some may not. Next thing you need to be familiar with is the manuscript preparation. So basically, a manuscript is the complete written version of a research study prepared by author for submission to a journal or a conference. Basically includes all the components such as the title, abstract, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusions, reference, tables, also the figures. And they all need to be formatted according to the target publication guidelines. So technically, this is the author's work in a professional and polished form, which is ready for peer review and publication. As the first step of the preparation, you need to draft the manuscript first. So you have to write a complete paper including all sections such as title, abstract, introduction, methodology, results, discussions, conclusions, as well as references. In addition to that, you can include the visuals. And the second step of the process is to format and style compliance. So basically here you have to ensure a manuscript follows the journal's formatting guidelines. For instance, if that is related to APA style, IEEE, or journal specific. And third step is to prepare visual elements, include tables, graphs, charts, diagrams, and label them properly. For instance, the table 1 according to APA style and the model accuracy. Also figure 1, the solar power prediction curve. And fourth step is to check reference and citations. You have to ensure all the in-text citations match the reference list and follow the required style. And the fifth step is a language and grammar review. You have to proofread for clarity, conciseness, grammar, and spelling errors. So you have to correct the awkward sentences like the model is performed well. So that sounds a little bit off the formality. Instead of that, you can write the model performs well. And the sixth step is plagiarism and originality check. You have to verify originality using software, maybe using Grammarly, Authenticate, and etc. You have to ensure less than 15% in similarity and all the sources are cited properly. And the last step is final review and submission package. You have to include cover letter, manuscript file, supplementary materials such as the appendices and datasets, and suggested reviews if required. So in practice, you can prepare the Word or PDF manuscript, cover letter, and supplementary CSV datasets for submission. As next step, we have cover letter preparation. The basic concept behind cover letter is to introduce your manuscript to the editor and highlight the importance of your study and explains why it's suitable for the journal. It needs to be professional, concise, and persuasive. And these are the key elements of a cover letter: manuscript title and type, and a brief statement of significance, and the confirmation that the manuscript is original and not under consideration elsewhere, and the disclosure of conflicts of interest. And optionally, you can suggest potential reviewers. For when you prepare your cover letter, you can usually use this template. And this is an example using that template. And next, you need to be familiar with the review response letter preparation. And this is basically the letter submitted when revising a manuscript after peer review. And it demonstrates how you have addressed review comments, and it should be polite and specific and also structured. The following are the key elements of a response letter. You have to thank the reviewers for their comments and number each review comment, and provide a point-by-point response and indicate changes in the manuscript by mentioning the page and the line numbers. For when you're preparing your review response letter, you can basically use this template. And this is a sample we have created to help you understand how to use this in your reviewer response letter. And our next topic is publication readiness. Before submitting a manuscript, it is important to ensure that it's ready for publication. This publication readiness basically means the manuscript meets all the technical, ethical, and stylistic requirements of the target journal, and the author have verified the work's originality, clarity, and completeness. It is worth noticing that the researchers must be cautious of predatory journals. because they usually make efforts to exploit authors by charging fees without providing legitimate peer review or indexing. And we have prepared a checklist to help you avoid those pitfalls. Also, this checklist reduces errors, improves clarity, and increases likelihood of acceptance. As the first thing, you have to check the title. It should be clear, concise, and informative. For an example, predicting solar energy output using machine learning models. And next, the abstract. It should consist of a summary of purpose, methods, results, and conclusions. You can basically use about 200 words for the abstract, including key statistics and findings. For keywords, you can use maybe about 36 keywords. For example, machine learning, solar energy, prediction models. And the introduction part. It should clearly define the problem, objectives, and the significance of the study. For an example, explain why accurate solar prediction is critical for grid management. And the next item is the methodology. It should be a detailed explanation of research design, data collection, and analysis. In this context, as an example, you can describe the dataset size, random forest, and LSTM models they have used, and evaluation metrics. And the results must be clearly presented with tables, figures, and different charts. And the next item is the discussion, and the interpretations of the result has to be relative with the existing literature. For example, comparison of a model accuracy with the previous study, and implications for renewable energy planning. The next item is the conclusion. It summarizes main findings and the future work. And references must be completed, formatted according to journal style being used. For example, IEEE style numbering. Those are represented by cited numbers inside square brackets. The next item is figures and tables. You have to correctly number them, caption them, and reference in text. In terms of language and grammar, you have to proofread and clearly explain them. This is where you check for spellings, grammar errors, and concise sentences. The next item is ethics and permissions. You have to obtain the IRB approval and the consent forms, copyright clearance if needed. And one of the most critical part is the plagiarism check. And it is the last one of the checklist. You need to verify the originality of your work. This is the final chapter of the video series. It's presenting your research. At the first, we have the presentation design. The presentation refers to the process of organizing and visually communicating research findings in a clear, engaging, and structured way for an audience. Here we have prepared a design guide. As the first slide of your presentation, the title comes first. Generally, you can include the research title, author name, affiliation, and the date. And the next slide can be dedicated for the background, where you can include the research context, problem statement, and the importance. And after that, the research objectives and questions, your study aims, and the research questions. For an example, to examine the relationship between AI recommendations and sales. You can dedicate a slide for literature review, where you can present the key previous studies and the theories. As an example, you can start off by mentioning that research shows AI improves personalization, and you can continue. And a slide for methodology is also compulsory, where you can present your research design, sample, tools, and procedures. And the results or the key findings, the main results using charts or tables. And a slide for discussion, where you can present the interpretation of results and implications. The next one is the conclusion, where you can summarize and make recommendations. And a slide for limitations and the future research work, because it is worth mentioning the constraints and the future research directions. And also a slide for the references for key citations. And lastly, the thank you slide or Q&A part. We also have prepared a design principle table. You can use this table to construct your slides up to the standards. A poster template is the visual representation that summarizes a study for a conference or academic presentation. You can use a structured approach to construct your research poster. As the first section, you can include the title and the authors, your research title, authors, and affiliation. The next part is the background, where you can include the research problem and its importance. The next section can be dedicated for objectives, which are the study's aims. And following that, the methodology, your research design, sample, and procedures. And the next section is the results. You can present the graphs, charts, key statistics, And in the discussion section, you can present the meaning of your findings, and a little about the conclusion in summarized manner along with implications, and the references as your citations. And finally, your contact information like your email and optionally the QR code. I've also constructed a table to guide your research posture to be more professional and standardized. So feel free to incorporate this guide into your workflow. Our last topic is delivery. Delivery is the process where the researcher communicates and presents the research findings to an audience. This is combined with the visual representation, and this is mainly focused on your verbal explanation of the study. Besides your presentation slides, your body language, voice control, and the interaction with the audience really make a huge impact on getting the points across. Clarity, confidence, and the efficiency are the most important factors in this context. And we have prepared an oral presentation checklist for you, as the very first area to focus on is your content clarity. You have to make sure your research objectives, methods, results, and the conclusions are clearly communicated to the audience. For example, you could clearly state that this study examines customer perception of AI services. And also, you have to keep tabs on the time management, because longer times might drag your audience into boredom. As a best practice, you can allocate 10 or 15 minutes to your entire presentation and 1 minute for introduction, maybe 7 to 10 minutes about your content, and 2 minutes for the conclusion. And also you have to make sure that slide readability. So simple design, large fonts, minimal text are the perfect combination. And as a best practice, you can use bullet points instead of long paragraphs. And practice and rehearsal. This is where you practically deliver multiple times before you go in front of the audience. And voice and pace is also important. Use a clear voice and a moderate speed with the proper pronunciation. It's also worth remembering when you are explaining the technical terms, speak a little bit slower. And the next thing you need to focus on is your body language. Keep your eye contact, confident posture, and controlled gestures. As a best practice, you can face audience instead of reading slides. Simultaneously, you can convince that you are speaking to the entire audience by looking all the directions. And also, it is important to use visuals such as charts, graphs, images, and support explanations. You can incorporate the most critical charts or bar charts to communicate your findings. And the next one is a technical preparation. You have to make sure all equipment are checked beforehand. For an example, you can test your projector and your laptop before the session. And the last item of the checklist is your opening and closing. Use a strong introduction during the opening and a properly structured summary during the closing. And the last topic is Q&A handling strategies. So Q&A basically stands for the questions and answering process. You have to listen carefully and pay full attention to the question before answering. As a best practice, let the questioner finish speaking. And you can clarify if needed. You can basically ask for explanation if the question is a little bit unclear. You can use a very polite language like, "Could you please clarify what you mean by customer engagement?" And repeat or rephrase questions to ensure correct understanding and help audience follow. As a practice, you can persuade the questioner that you have understood the question using sentence like, "So your question is about the sample size selection." And during the questions, just try to stay calm and confident, because it is important to maintain your professional attitude even with difficult questions. And always try to answer briefly and clearly, give direct and focused responses. Also, you can support with evidence from your research findings. For an example, according to our survey results, 70% of users preferred AI services. And also be honest and admit limitations, because it is important to acknowledge when you do not know the answer. In this context, you can say that it requires further research. And also redirect off-topic questions and politely bring the discussion right back to the research scope. And also lastly, thank the questioner, show your appreciation for feedback. For an example, you can say, "Thank you for your important question." And we have also included learning resources such as recommended books, online courses, and also web tools. Collectively, these tools will help you master your knowledge in academic research. And always remind yourself that your dedication is the only thing that makes the difference. With that being said, we have come to the end of our fourth as well as the last video tutorial in the series. We believe that this video tutorial series have helped you acquire a new academic skill. Subscribe to our CIVIX University channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll get notified once we post our new tutorials to come. Until then, keep learning everyone.